Hello, and welcome to the second in the Follett free webinar series. Today's webinar is on weeding and building your collection with reports. Lee Alatorre will be your trainer for this webinar. My name is Holly Landauer, and I will be the moderator. Before we get started, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the session format. This webinar will be recorded for future distribution. The phone lines will be muted, and all conversations will be via the chat feature. If you do have a question, please submit it via the chat box. When you type in the chat box, make sure your chat is going to all attendees. If you do not see a chat box, click on Chat from the drop-down menu that appears at the top of the screen. If you would like to open your Destiny Library Manager site and log into Titlewave and follow along with what is being shown on the screen, please feel free to do so. Thank you for joining us. We will now get started. I will turn the webinar over to Lee Alatorre. Lee?
Good afternoon. Thank you. I do not have the capability to share my desktop just yet. Let me get that back.
All right. There seems to be a slight lag, Lee. You should have it now.
Not giving it to me.
Let me
go about it a different way.
I am seeing your desktop coming up now.
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. Let me move this out of the way. Okay, good afternoon. As Holly said, welcome to Weed and Build Your Collection with Reports. I am Lee Alatorre. I'm a retired secondary teacher and librarian who's been a Follett Destiny trainer for a year and a half. Collection development, and especially deselection, or what we tend to call weeding, became my specialty early in my library career, since I always seemed to be drawn to working in older libraries whose collections were significantly aged. So I've been a proponent of using the Title-wise Analysis and Titlewave, two of the collection development tools we'll be looking at today, for about 15 years. Today we'll look at these tools, the collection statistics reports that you have in your Reports tab in Library Manager, and Follett's Title-wise collection analysis. Then we'll look at the features in Titlewave that help you rebuild or enhance your collection. We'll take a few questions after each topic is demonstrated and at the end of the session. As Holly said, please use the chat feature to enter your questions. Our objectives for this session are to understand why weeding is important, to explore the two collection analysis tools, and to explore Titlewave's various collection development features. First, let's find out how many of you have a Titlewave account already. Click on the green check mark at the bottom of the participant box if you do. Okay, it looks like only a couple of you have a Titlewave account. Also, click on the green check mark if you already are a Title-wise analysis user. You know that your library collection has been submitted and you've gotten a Title-wise analysis report back. Okay, a few more of you. This is good because this way I'm not preaching to the choir, so this helps me to know that many of you need the information I'm going to be giving you. So thank you so much for doing that. So let's start with what weeding is. It's also called culling. Formally in library school, it's called deselection. Essentially, it's the removal of books and other materials that are damaged and beyond repair, contain outdated or inaccurate information, or no longer fit into the scope of the library's collection. Perhaps the curriculum has changed and you no longer need those materials. Why should we weed? There are 6 generally accepted reasons. The first, space. You have a finite number of shelves. You cannot keep everything that you have ever purchased. You also save time. It's easier to find and shelve materials when your shelving isn't stuffed end to end. Number 3 deals with visual appeal. When there are fewer books on each shelf, the shelves look nicer, the books are easier to browse, and your circulation can actually increase because your students are drawn into the shelves and are able to find the materials they're looking for. You will also enhance your library's reputation because your students and teachers know that your materials are current and reliable. Number 5, once you start planning your weeding, you get into a systematic evaluation of your collection, and so you're able to keep up with its needs. And finally, the last reason is that you'll know the strengths and weaknesses of your collection. This is handy when you need to justify to your principal or your district, or on a grant proposal perhaps, why you need additional funds for books. So why aren't we weeding? Perhaps you're in a new library. Some of us are in a library that may be less than 4 years old. We don't need to weed. Why should we weed? We've got new books. Or do we have new books? Newer libraries sometimes have older materials. Smaller libraries may have gotten a lot of donations to help them get started. Opening day collections, even in large libraries, typically have older copyrighted materials. The classics, a general information basis that may include some things that are not being used in your curriculum. Also, there are those age-sensitive categories. There are 9 categories that the recommended publication dates should be no older than 5 years old. If your school is young, say it opened in 2007, in 2012, I'm sorry, and you had materials that were published in 2007, which were perfectly fine for a building that was opening in 2012. Well, today, in 2016, those materials are now 9 years old, which, if they are in age-sensitive categories, that's 4 years older than they should be. Other reasons for why we're not weeding. I hear a lot, I don't have time, or I have too much else to do that's more important. What can be more important than knowing that you have a current and relevant collection for your students and staff? And then there are the fears. I'm afraid I'm going to get rid of something that someone needs. We hear that a lot from new librarians, and we also hear that from veteran librarians who are going into a new building for the first time and don't want to antagonize someone that may have been using something for the last 10 or 15 years. And then I don't know where to start. That's always a big one, especially if you're walking into a building that has an extremely aged collection. You can alleviate the worries and fears about weeding by creating a plan using the tools that are readily available to you. Your pre-configured reports in Library Manager, and your title-wise collection analysis to evaluate your collection. And then use Titlewave to either rebuild your collection if it needs weeding, or to enhance your collection if it's in good shape. So how do we move from this, shelves packed end to end, albeit they look very nice and neat, to this, shelves that are filled only 1/2 to 2/3. Invite browsing and allow additional display space for new or popular titles, or to promote materials that are good but just not moving. We move to this by using our available tools. We're going to start by looking at the pre-configured collection statistics reports that are right in your Destiny Library Manager, the Collection Statistics Historical and Collection Statistics Summary. I'm going to move to my Destiny to demonstrate how to use these. I'm in the Reports tab, Library Reports option. I scroll down to the very bottom. It's the last group called Statistics. And we're going to start with the second report, the Collection Statistics Summary. I click on it. It does take a few seconds to load because it's populating the data when you click on that title. There aren't any parameters for you to set. Notice that there are 3 sub-tabs. We're going to start with circulation. This shows the number of times that an item has circulated today, this month, this year, and for all time since you acquired it. It's broken down by call number ranges. The last column shows the total number of copies that you have in your collection. So if we look at my 500s, I can see that I have 1,372 copies in my collection in the 500s, which represents a little over 10% of my collection. But when I look at my circulations for the year, I've only had 25 circulations from those 1,300 copies, almost 1,400 copies. And all time, I've only had 60 circulations. Why do I have so many if so few are circulating? I can click on the links to see the specific titles that I've got if I wanted to. I'm not going to do that at this point. The Age sub-tab gives us some of the same information. We still have circulations for this year and total circulations all time, and we also have the total number of copies. The additional columns that we have are for age, which lists the age of the copies that actually have dates in the publication record. Those MARC records that you may have that don't show a publication date are not calculated into this figure. So we know how many we've got. It also calculates the average age for us. So for instance, for my zeros, the average age of my zero ranges is 1998. And it tells me that in years, I don't have to do the subtraction, that's 18 years old for just my zeros. The Value sub-tab gives us the worth of our collection. At the bottom we have the total of the columns. Let me explain how this value is determined. The first column shows us copy with prices. So that's the purchase price in your MARC record or in your item record actually. So it shows me I have, for my zeros, 6 copies that had prices. The actual value, so the total of those 6 copies, is $89.55. Then there's an estimated value. I have some copies too, since my total copies is 8 and I had 6 with prices. The 2 copies that did not have prices, an average is calculated from those that did have prices, and that number is added to the actual value to come up with the estimated value. This also shows my circulations for the year, my total circulations, and my total copy count. Let's look now at the historical report. So I go back to my library reports, scroll back down to statistics, and we're going to click on Collection Statistics Historical. This report loads quickly because we're going to be establishing the parameters in the Create New Report subtab. So we can specify circulation dates. If I want to go back to the start of 2013 and take it through the end of September this year, that gives me almost 4 full years. I can show a summary only, in which case I'll identify what increment I want to show, whether I want to show just the hundreds, the tens, or the ones. But I also have the option to look at title and copy details, and that's the one that I want. So when I do this, I can organize it by call number prefix, which is where I'm going to keep it, but I could also choose one of the other options. I'm interested in my 500s, specifically my 520s, since that is an age-sensitive area. So that's the call number range that I want to look at. When I changed it to title and copy details, my increment option went away, and it now gives me the option to limit the copies that I'm showing. So which ones do I want to look at? I want to look at those with circulations. I could choose more than a certain number, less than a certain number, but in this case, I want to see what I have in that range that is not circulating at all, that has had 0 circulations in almost 4 years. I can select all my circulation types, or I can click Update to select just a particular circulation type. This is a nice feature. I can choose my output as a PDF, but I can also choose it as a Microsoft Excel document, and I'm going to make this an Excel document. I can run the report as is, but if I've spent the time deciding what the parameters are that I want, perhaps I want to save that setup so that I can use it again. I'm going to click Save Setup, and that allows me to put in a unique name for this report. At this point, I could save it, or I could save and run the report. I'm actually going to cancel out of here because I want to show you the Saved Reports subtab. If I click on that, it has the report that I just set the parameters for. I ran that earlier. I've already marked it as a favorite because this is something I'm going to use frequently. I can edit the report. I can duplicate the report if I want to use exactly the same parameters but just change the call number field. And at this point, I'm just going to run the report. And it gives me the option that I may want to update my report date settings. Right now I don't because I know that this is the one that I just entered. It has all the information. I did opt to just look for my regular circulation types, those items that are in my circulating collection. I'm going to click Save and Run, and when I do that, it gets me to my report manager. I refresh my list, and when I click on View, instead of the PDF coming up as we're used to seeing, notice that it downloads an Excel document. Well, I've already saved that over here, and I've already adjusted my column width so that they look nicer than just the short columns that, the narrow columns that we get when it first comes up. So I've got an awful lot of 520s that have no circulations. Now, I don't understand why, because this is a popular topic in my campus, and I thought that things were circulating. So this now, I can go to my shelves, look up the call numbers, and I can actually physically look at the book. I can decide, okay, is this an old book? I need to look at the copyright date, or is it a damaged book? Does it need some repair, and that's why it's not moving? Or is it a new item, but I just haven't promoted it well enough? So this gives me a lot of information that I can use to make an evaluation about it. Before we move back to the PowerPoint, do we have any questions about this section, Holly?
Hi, Lee. There are no questions at this time, so continue on.
Great. Thank you. So we have just looked at the 2 highlighted reports here, Collection Statistics, Historical, and Summary. Now, let's look at the title-wise analysis and see what it does for us. We can access our title-wise analysis through our Titlewave account. And if you don't have a Titlewave account, that's perfectly okay. I'm going to show you how you can get one because it is a free service. So don't worry about this. I just want to show you the tool that you have available to you at absolutely zero cost. So we can access it one of two ways, from Titlewave.com. And if I click on that, it takes me to Titlewave, and I have the option, if I have an account, to sign in. If I don't have an account, it gives me the option to sign up. So I can click on Sign Up, just fill out the form that's the information that's requested, click Continue. It does take about 24 hours to process the registration, and you'll get an email from Follett that says your Titlewave account is now ready to use. The second way of getting to your Titlewave account is directly from Library Manager. And I actually like this because it's easier to use. From the Catalog tab, Titlewave option, the Use Titlewave subtab is the one that comes up by default. If you already have your Titlewave account configured to Library Manager, what you see is what my screen is showing. To change your Follett Titlewave account, click Change. If you have changed schools this year but haven't configured your Titlewave account to your new school, this is what you would click and put in your username and your Titlewave password, and you would click Save. If you don't have a Titlewave account already, if you don't have a Titlewave account or don't have one already configured to it, this is the screen that you see. So for those of you that may be signing up for a Titlewave account today, when you get that information, you can go to Catalog, Titlewave option, type in your Titlewave username and your password, and click Save. Then, when you do that, I'm going to cancel out of here because I'm already configured in my Library Manager. You just come into the middle block where it says Visit Titlewave, and you click anywhere on that block. And that takes you directly into Titlewave. Notice I don't have to log in. I don't have to sign in. It already recognizes me from Destiny Library Manager. At this point, for those of you that may not be familiar with the Titlewave.com homepage, anything that's brand new is usually put across the top of the page in a banner. So TitleWise, the new TitleWise format, is actually only about a month old. It was rolled out about the middle of September. So I'm going to click on here, and it shows us that we got a major upgrade. There is a new TitleWise User's Guide that is in PDF format, so it's easy for you to download and print it. And this page shows you some of the key features that have changed in this. You could click on the button at the bottom of the page to get to your analysis, but another way to get there, especially once that banner is gone, when the TitleWise analysis is no longer considered new, is to click on the Your Account tab and go to TitleWise Analyses. So that's what I'm going to do. This brings us to a page that's called the Browse Analyses page. This lists every analysis that has been done for your school, whether it was done by you or someone that was there before you or someone in your district. And remember, my database is a training database. I don't have a real school. So we have several trainers that are running these. So you see that we run analyses sometimes several times a day, sometimes within a couple of days of each other, and there are lots of different people that are using this. But I'm going to go down to the one that I did. Before I actually get into it, you may notice that there are some different colored dots in the column that is labeled Status. The red dot has to do with the lack of data integrity that was submitted. So in other words, when the MARC records went to Follett to be analyzed, less than 40% of those records had good enough information in them to be analyzed. It could be that there were a lot of missing publication dates. There may have been many incomplete call numbers. There may have been call numbers that just weren't identified as being real call numbers. So those are the usual reasons for having that low data integrity. The yellow button means that the data integrity ranged between 40 and 90%. The higher the percentage, the better the evaluation you can make from the information that's in your analysis. The green button tells us that the data integrity was at least 90%, so the information in the analysis is very good. I'm going to click on View, and this will take us into the new formatted report. Since there weren't too many of you that use the old format, I'm not going to necessarily make comparisons to the old format, but just be aware that there are two tabs here, Settings and Diagnostics. We're going to go into those a little bit later. I want to show you the meat of the report, which is right here. It identifies my school, in this case our Follett Library Collection, the grades, the number of students, the date of the analysis, and who submitted the information. This is the contact information. It tells me the total number of items in my collection, and it shows me that I had 99.6% recognized call numbers. That's a very high data integrity. That's what we're talking about. That's the number that you want to get above 90%. It also tells me I had 99.6% recognized publication years. So that means I can have confidence in the fact that the average age it's showing for my collection is probably valid. So now, when I look at the average age and I look at the items per student, I have reason to be worried about my collection. This tells me I need weeding. My collection is 20 years old. That's a little old for a school library collection. My items per student is 17.1. My district, and this is not a number that Follett puts in. This is a number that you put in, what you want your items per student to be. My district says 10 items per student is considered satisfactory. But my district also says that 10 years old is the ideal for a library collection. So with my collection being 20 years old and my having so many more items per student than what my district thinks is satisfactory, that tells me even though I have a lot of materials, more is not necessarily better, because what it's telling me is that many of those materials, many of those extra materials are probably older materials that aren't being used. So I shouldn't be wasting my space, my limited library space, shelf space, on older materials. As we scroll down through the report, your print, audiovisual, and digital collections are identified in a graph. I don't have AV materials, so it only shows my print and my digital, my electronic resources, and it gives the average age. There's also a graph breaking down the percent of fiction versus nonfiction in my library and gives me the average age of each. We have the collection by Dewey. This shows all the Dewey classes, so the 0s through the 900s, and it also shows the other classifications, your fiction, your reference, your biography. If you have a special collection like Spanish or graphic novels, they would be included here as well. It gives me the total number of items, and I can click on either the links or the total number of items to see a listing of what is in that area. For instance, since I've been looking at my 520s, let's click on the 500s. Tells me I have 1,371 items in my collection, and the average age of that is 2004. I can narrow that down. If I want to see just what I have that's the newer, I have 294 that are newer. But look at this. If I were to narrow this by age titles, it tells me I have 656 age titles. So I could also narrow it by that. I can also narrow it by publication years, so I can see what decades I have, and I have 3 from the 1980s, and I have a bunch from the 1990s. I can also narrow it by interest level or by reading level. If I know that I seem to be short of materials that a certain grade level is interested in, or that a teacher wants for her students with a particular reading level, I could narrow this down and see, well, is the reason they're not checking out materials because my materials are too old? And I could make some decisions that way. I'm going to go back to the main page of my analysis. And notice that at the bottom of the Dewey ranges, there is a link that says dig into the Dewey divisions by tens. If I click on that link, it takes me into my Dewey areas, but it's broken them down into the tens. So if I scroll down to my 520s, which is the area that I was focusing on when I was in my library manager report, this is my astronomy section, and it is an age-sensitive category. It tells me how many books I've got in each of the decades, and it tells me, so I can click on the 69, and it takes me to that list. I can sort this by call. By default, it's sorted by call number. I can also sort it by title, by author, or by publication year, or by barcode if I wanted to. I'm going to leave it set at call number. The other option that it gives me, just as your library manager reports gave you the option to print the report as an Excel spreadsheet, this one does the same thing. So I'm going to get my report opened in Excel. Notice it downloads right away. And again, I've already got it open here. The difference between this report and the one that I showed you from Library Manager is that it does have the publication year. It also has the other information that's available in your MARC record regarding interest level, reading level, special programs, Lexiles. So if I wanted to resort this so that instead of having to go to my shelves and say, okay, I'm going to go by call number, oh, but I'm going to skip 2013, I'm going to skip 1998, and have to look around, I can actually just do a custom sort. And I am interested in sorting this by publication year. And now I know what my oldest materials are. I can just go and pull those. And when I look through my list, I see I really do have a whole lot. 2011 is the outside range of what's considered age sensitive. That's 5 years from today. And I really don't have that many items that are in that range that I'm looking for, that publication range that I'm looking for. I'm going to go back to my report and go back to my Dewey classifications by 10. If I decide I need to find something right away that's going to replace some of those items that I'm going to have to pull, notice that there is a search for link. This takes us to the advanced search function of Titlewave. It already has the Dewey range that I'm interested in replacing. I can go in and specify that I want nonfiction, or I can specify that I want copyright years that are only the last 2 years, whatever else you want to set for your parameters for your advanced search. And you can do your search that way. The other thing that the Dewey division by tens allows us to do is look at weeding candidates. So I'm going to click on the tab that says Weeding Candidates. And this is a method for weeding that comes from the CREW manual. CREW stands for Continuous Review, Evaluation, and Weeding. There is a link to the manual itself. It is several pages long. It was last revised in 2008 and then revised again in 2012 to include an addendum on ebooks. There are other resources available for you regarding weeding, so if you're new to weeding and just want to learn a little bit more about it and what you need to do to set up a plan, this can be valuable material for you. The formula, the first number in the formula is the number of years old that it should be for that category of material. The middle number is the ideal number of circulations, at least that many circulations. X would be something that you determine what the circulations are. And then musty is the other consideration. I can never remember what musty is, so I've actually got it typed up here for you. Musty stands for, the M is for misleading. The information in that book is factually inaccurate. I had a book in my library a few years ago that was talking about the USSR as being the largest country in the world right now. Well, the USSR doesn't exist anymore. That was factually inaccurate. That book needed to be pulled. U stands for ugly. It's worn beyond mending or rebinding. It may be, it's got a very faded cover to it. Superseded. It's been superseded by a new or better book on the subject. You may have 3 editions of a series on the shelf. You're not doing your students any favors by keeping the first 2 editions, because that third, newer edition supersedes both the information in that third edition supersedes the material that's in those first 2 editions. T stands for trivial, meaning of no discernible literary or scientific merit. I have a caveat to that. We're in school libraries. If our libraries were very sophisticated, that might come into play. But we all know that in a school library, there are going to be some trivial things. My middle schoolers would have hated to not have joke books available. Elementary students the same. I would guess that high school students would also like to have some lighthearted materials, some trivial materials. Which brings us to the I, irrelevant. If it's irrelevant to the needs and interests of the library's community, it may need to be weeded. My joke books were relevant to the needs of my community. They were not trivial in my case. So those are judgments that you have to make for your campus. And then the last criteria, the E, is the information easily obtainable from another library or source? You may have a public library that has a really, really good collection on a topic that is not very popular in your library. You may have just a handful of teachers or students looking for material on that topic. If you know that your public library has that information, rather than buying a lot of material for just a few people, you can direct them to the public library. The other thing is the source. If print reference collections become very unwieldy when you have to keep up with every volume, they get very expensive. The older the older the series gets, the further along that we get in years as publication costs go up. And the information is already available to us in our databases, our online databases. Now, some of those databases we may subscribe to. Some of those databases may be given to us through our district, which our district has a subscription to them. Some of our databases may come from our states. And you have free databases in your OneSearch, in your library manager. So you do have a lot of reference material that may be available to you already. So why would you want to continue to add to your print reference collection when you're duplicating that information and it's staying up to date in your online databases? So that would be a situation where the material may be elsewhere, and so you may not need to keep something that is older. Going back to our analysis, and we're going to go back to the main page, and we're going to go back to this collection by Dewey classification area where we have the hundreds. I've talked about the age-sensitive areas, those categories, those 9 categories. We've looked at the 520s. If I click on the age-sensitive areas tab, this shows me all 9 of the areas. I can click on any of the links to see the complete list, but notice it shows me the average age of each of these categories. Now remember, these are things that ideally should only have been published within the last 5 years. I do not have an average age of 2011 in any of my age-sensitive categories. It tells me the number of items I have and the number of those items that are considered aged. So out of my 556 items, 498 of them are aged. The Explore More Weeding Candidates takes us into our crew area. So the same thing, the Weeding Candidates sub-tab tab that we had here is the same thing as what we click on here. But this does tell me, notice that the arrow's pointing over here too, tells me that 65% of the titles in my entire collection, 6,700 of them, are aged. Only 8% of my collection is considered having been published in the last 5 years. So that's not very many when I think that I've got over 10,000 items in my collection. So these are the things that always used to be on the title-wise analysis. The difference between the old format and this format is I can do so much more with this wealth of information. I can access it, I can sort it, I can manipulate it in so many different ways now. In addition, the new format allows us to also see our collection by interest level. My current school is an elementary school, so it makes sense that I have more items in the K3 to 3-6 range, and yet I have some 5-8 materials, but I have significantly lower numbers of YA or adult materials. I can also sort my collection by reading levels. So I could take a look at what my general reading levels are. This is coming from your MARC record. But if I have special programs, if I have a reading program, I can also click on that to see what materials I have in those areas. So that's a handy thing that we did not have available to us before. Now let's quickly look at the Diagnostics and Settings tabs that were at the top of the page. If I click on Diagnostics, it gives me the basic information that used to come out on the first page of the old format. Contact information, school information, the analysis overview, and the MARC statistics. This is where you'll also see the link to your incomplete call numbers and your incomplete publication years. If these numbers are high on your analysis, don't worry about trying to clean that up. What this is saying is, especially if you've got an older collection, weed your collection first. Start weeding those older materials, and these numbers will automatically go down. We don't need to worry about this until you've got your collection in a somewhat better shape as far as age goes. but know that the information is there for you if you want it. Now, let's look at the Settings tab. The Settings tab is where you go in and put the information regarding your school. Your enrollment, this is where you want to identify your enrollment. You want to have your enrollment as accurate as possible. I know a lot of districts use the 12th class day as the official enrollment for the school. So that was what I always used to use for my enrollment figure. This is where you can put in your items per student if you need to change that to something else. This is also where you put in your contact information, and you can name your analysis. If you're rerunning your analysis, you can give it a special name so it'll come up a little differently from the original one. If I click Next, this takes us to our circulation system information, and then to our categories for both books and for AV. This is where you indicate the call numbers that you use, perhaps the prefixes that you use. For instance, I like to use F for my fiction books, but perhaps the librarian before me used FIC in her call numbers. Unless I've gone in and changed every one of those FICs to F, if all I have here is just that my call numbers start with F, then the analysis is not picking up anything that has FIC in it. So when we had lower data integrity, it could be we weren't including everything that was used as a call number for a particular area. The same holds true with reference. Some people use REF, some people use R, professional, PRO, PROF. And again, if you have special areas, if you have a Spanish collection or a French collection or a German collection or graphic novels, you want to identify every book category that you have in your library. Once you have that done, you're going to look at some additional information. You have the opportunity to make some changes here. If you do not want your equipment analyzed and you use a prefix of EQ in your call number for your equipment, then this is where you would tell Titlewise to ignore the prefix EQ. If you use, if your teachers check out class sets of novels from you, and perhaps you identify those novels by a GR prefix, but you only check out to your teachers, they keep them for the whole year, they don't really count as your circulation statistics, and they've got some older novels that they're using, so you don't want them to count in your circulation, in your analysis, you can specify that particular prefix. You can also remove a prefix. Maybe you have genreified your library, and so you have pulled your 796s from the Dewey area, and you've decided to give them a prefix of SPO for sports. But when it comes to your analysis, if you would like to have those materials analyzed with the rest of your 700s, then you can tell it to remove the prefix SPO. It's not going to take it out of your catalog. It's just going to not use it. It will move down to the 796 number that you've got and analyze it with the rest of your 700s. The age sensitivity tab lists those 9 age-sensitive categories, and the acceptable age in years. This is what is considered generally acceptable. 3 years for computer programming materials. Most school libraries cannot afford to replace their computer items every 3 years, so I know that there are many librarians that will change that to 5. There may be some librarians that can't afford to replace their atlases every 5 years, and they may change that to 7. 5 years is acceptable. However, this is your tool, and you know what you need to do for your campus. Age titles. 15 years is considered acceptable all the way down through all of the items. That's what is used as the default. However, you can modify this as well. Perhaps in your literature, you've got so much poetry that can go longer than 15 years. You've got some of your classics, you may have your Shakespeare plays. Maybe 20 years is okay. There are going to be pockets in those 800s that it will not be okay to go 20 years. Your literary criticism wouldn't want to go 20 years with that. But for the majority of the items in your 800s, maybe 20 years would work. In your story collections, perhaps you decide you want to go 25 years. And for your easy materials, your picture books, 25 years, I've known some librarians who will go 30 years. So you can adjust that. There may be something that perhaps you want to bring down. Maybe you want to make fiction only 10 years old because you want to keep your fiction current. Once you've got that set the way you want, the next tab is Holdings Location. That's actually an advanced setting that is typically used more by districts than they are by individual campuses. So you can take a look at that and decide whether it's something that you want to deal with or just leave to your district. And then you click Finish. Once you click Finish, it automatically reruns your analysis for you. I'm not going to do that, but I am going to go back to the analysis page. When you first submit, after you've done some weeding and you want to submit your collection again, you can submit your collection by just clicking on the Submit Collection button here. You can also go back to your library manager, and in that same page, Catalog Titlewave option, you can also upload your collection for analysis by clicking the Submit button here. One caution is make sure that your district has given you the authority to submit your collection for analysis. In some larger districts, this is done at the district level. So you will know whether or not you can do this because you've done it before, you know that previous librarians have done it, but a quick call to your district library coordinator would be able to determine whether or not this is something that you could do or whether it's something that the district does for you. Are there any questions about what we have covered in this section?
Hi, Lee. So far, there are none.
Okay.
No one has typed anything in the chat.
Okay. One of the things that you might want to jot down, if you need any assistance setting up or understanding your analysis, you can call the school support specialist. The number is at the bottom of every page that's in the analysis and at the bottom of Titlewave. However, there's also a new number that you can also use. So the new number is 877-899-8550, extension 45051. So it's the same extension, so it'll be going to the same person. It's just this number is used for so many other customer support things also that it looks like Titlewave and Titlewise have gotten another number designated for them. We have looked at how to analyze our collection. Now, let's look at how to build our collection with Titlewave. Not everything that was identified in your analysis needs to be weeded, just like not everything that you've weeded needs to be replaced. Does it support the current curriculum? No, don't replace it. Do you already own the latest edition? Yes, don't replace it. Is it grade level appropriate for your students? Is it a subject or series that your students are still reading? Is it something your district mandates? If it is, you need to keep it. But If it's not, maybe you need to go ahead and let go of it. Titlewave can help you rebuild or enhance your collection. So let's go back to Titlewave. And I am going to, don't know if you knew, but if you click on the titlewave.com here, it takes you back to that main page. You can shop by department. The library will have information on makerspaces, curriculum support, new and popular series. Classroom and Curriculum has your STEM materials, your e-books, and other materials. E-books, state resources. Mine is showing Illinois, but yours will show the resources for your state. Collection development we've talked about. Subscriptions. If you're familiar with Junior Library Guild, know that Follett also has Title Easy packages by grade level. And if you click on the link to learn more about it, it will give you some specific information on what the criteria are and how you can set it up so that you won't get duplicates. And there's also a fundraising option. You can look at a Title Wish toolkit for fundraising for your school. If we scroll down towards the middle of the page, Follett Student Choice gives the top 50 lists organized by grade level, and these are compiled from the circulation statistics. The International Baccalaureate Curriculum Support. Follett is now an exclusive dealer for this. So schools can use Titlewave to be able to use a purchase order and avoid paying taxes on their orders if they participate in this curriculum. The e-commerce site is still the site to be used for parents and anyone who does not qualify to register for a Titlewave account. There's a curriculum alignment service that you can click on the Tell Us About Your Project, fill out a form, and there will be, this is a free service, there are curriculum specialists that will help you develop a list to meet those curriculum needs that you may have. Now, this is not a quick turnaround service, so you need to allow at least a couple of weeks for them to get some of this information, and depending on the topic, it may take more time than that. But the other thing, if you scroll further down, and I'm hoping that we can get this moved up to a higher location, if you like buying materials that are reviewed in School Library Journal, you can shop this month's School Library Journal reviews whether or not you have a subscription to School Library Journal. This is showing the materials that were reviewed in the October 2016 edition. But if you click on the link for School Library Journal, that takes you back to everything in the last year, including the special supplements. So that's a good way to be able to know that you're going into those items that were reviewed by School Library Journal. One other thing that I wanted to point out, you know how to search already. You know that you can save your searches to lists. When you open up your list and view it, some of the new things that have been added, you can analyze that list for interest level, for grade level, for reading level, and you can also look at publication dates. So you can see whether you're actually buying more old materials or whether you're buying more current materials. And you can share the list. We talked about the fact that your teachers can now have a Titlewave account. If you click on share, you can share it with your teachers if you know their Titlewave usernames. Better yet, they can create items, lists of items that they want for their curriculum, and they can share it with you if you give them your username. So that's a very handy way to get your teachers involved in your curriculum as well. So by way of review, we have looked at your Destiny Library Manager reports. We've looked at your title-wise analysis to evaluate your collection and plan your reading projects. we've looked at several ways to search for new materials, especially some of those specific materials that you need for your library, rather than just doing a keyword search. We sincerely appreciate your time today, and at this point we'd like to say, if you have any other questions, please ask. Holly?
I'm watching the chat. So far there are no other questions. We'll give it another couple minutes just to see.
Okay.
I did get a comment saying that this webinar has been very helpful and useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
All right, any questions? Thank you all for your comments in the chat. It's nice hearing that you found this to be a useful webinar. If there are no further questions, it concludes today's webinar. We hope you learned something new you can take back and use in your library. We will be sending a link to the recording of this webinar to everyone who registered. It will also be posted on the Follett community website within 72 hours. Lee and I will hang out just for a couple more minutes if you think of any last-minute questions. Otherwise, thank you again and have a wonderful day. Lee, I did get a question for you.
Okay.
The question is a little bit off the topic, but I'll ask it. It just says, in Destiny Quest, can I set it to show Lexile level in addition to or instead of guided reading level?
That is a question that I'm not sure of. Let's go over there and see. I'm not sure. You wanted Lexile level? Okay, what was the question again?
Yes, it does.
Lexile.
Yeah, she just wanted to know if we could set Lexile levels instead of guided reading levels.
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, but I can certainly look that up.
No. Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not sure that you can. Destiny Quest, you know, is the older search interface. They are now going towards Destiny Discover. And I know that you can do it in Destiny Discover.
Mm-hmm. And Destiny Quest, that's one of the things that's not being, we're not continuing to enhance the features there, so that would not be something that they would add to it because of Destiny Discover being used.
All right. Any other questions? All right, I think we are good. Thank you again, everyone, for attending.